I gotta tell you, I love it when you get to see an artist make that jump to the next level of stardom. This summer, that artist is clearly Charli XCX. Her album, Brat, is one of the most talked about albums of the summer. So today on the show, how Brat took over the conversation. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, I've been away for a couple of weeks and I've just been playing this album over and over again. The summer just started, but it already belongs to Charli XCX. You're listening to 360 from the album Brat, with all signs pointing to this being a big Brat summer. Rihanna Cruz and Sachi Cole are here. I believe they're both bumping that. Rihanna, Sachi, welcome to the show. How y'all doing?
Good, happy to be here.
I see.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You did not deny the allegations of bumping that, which I appreciate. Rihanna, I'm going to start with you, okay? I think we got to talk a little bit about Charli and situate ourselves in this moment of Charli, because the music is catchy, it's a lot of fun, but also some people are here pretending that Charli has not been around for a million years doing this exact thing. So can we just talk about this moment in Charli and how we arrived at Brat?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Charli has been at the forefront of the forward-thinking pop music conversation for a while.
Yeah.
Some people might still know her from the boom clap, icona pop, I love it era of her career.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yes. But over the past, decade or so, she's really made a concentrated effort to be at the forefront of new sounds and experimental pop music. And that has mostly gone off the radar unless you're like a very dedicated pop music listener, like people like she has a very if you know fan base where it's like if you're tapped in, you're tapped in. And I think with Brat, where we find ourselves is, that sort of if you know mentality kind of reaching a larger audience finally due to, Charli's forward-thinking pop sound, finally, reaching, I think, like a maximum audience.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that in a moment, because like Charli, you're hearing a lot of people who are like, hey, how did this artist kind of come out of nowhere? And if Charli XCX came out of nowhere for you, then I don't know what you've been listening to, right? Like she's been around since the MySpace era of music, and she's kind of been your favorite artist for a minute, and there's so many different pop touch points that have just borrowed from her music, either explicitly or implicitly. Just a lot of people are like, I want to be a little bit like Charli. So the idea that she's now at the main pop girl status, that's interesting to me. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. But Sachi, we got to talk about the mood that she's introduced with this album. The idea that she called it Brat, with like lime green, fluorescent green background, capital letters Brat. You wrote this article for Slate with the headline "Getting Loser, It's Big Brat Summer." I think you're making the argument that like Charli has done it. She's captured the mood that we need to sort of pay attention to this summer. What do you think it is about this album that connects to that mood? Also, what is that mood?
I mean, well, first of all, as you know, I am a Brat and have been one for many years, even longer than Charli, indeed. Yeah. But what's interesting about the album is, it's the sound is really fun and it's really poppy, and it is, this very forward-thinking pop song, but the lyrics are so sad, and they're really about like excavating your personal grief and your personal trauma and trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life and being in despair in this current moment. And I think this summer, a lot of people are kind of in this place of everything's broken, nothing works. I'm so sad. The world is on fire. There's genocide everywhere. No one can buy anything from Loblaws because there's a billionaire who insists that eggs be $15. So what we do have is we can dance at the club. And like that is the energy of this summer, which is I'm going to be a brat. I have nothing left to lose.
Yeah, there's a sort of a rebelliousness to the idea of owning the brat identity of like, hey, I was promised a certain future. Like Charli's 31, you know, she's saying I was promised a certain future, which is to say, like, if you work really hard and you try to line up all these things in your life, then things will work out. I think if you're a millennial or a Gen Z and you're looking at the future and you're like, is this the working out that you've promised us? And this album is kind of like landing in that moment to me, which is like, you're exactly right, Sachi, to point out like this interplay between the lyrics of this is really dark, this is really like all of our insecurities are spilling out, in some cases really unfiltered, but then the music is like, please join me in the club where we will dance to our insecurities together. For you, when you were sort of trying to craft this piece, what has the response been like to the idea that you're saying, you know what, we're all going to be brats this summer? How have people responded?
Well, obviously everyone agrees with me, and I've been given lots of bouquets, and people have written letters about how right I am.
Of course.
I already know I'm right.
That's how that works.
The thing is like this album is landing at the same time that we're seeing like a lot of these student protests. And so it's interesting to think about these kids who are being called brats, who are being told you're being bratty for not wanting to sit in class and be super cool about your college being in participation with an arms dealer. Like there is this relationship between this kind of music, that kind of energy, the disappointment we feel about being, you know, in our 20s and our 30s and seeing like, I don't know if I can retire. And then the term brat is constantly thrown at us when we create some dissent, when we try to do something for ourselves. So yeah, but everyone agrees. I'm right. I've never been wrong. And I don't know why that would change today.
It certainly hasn't changed since you just said that. Rihanna, let's talk about the relationship that other pop stars have to Charli, because she shows up in just like really interesting places. So Katy Perry has this new record coming out. She's released these like teaser images. And like a bunch of people were looking at them and being like, that's just Charli. Like we know what Charli XCX has looked like for years. This is clearly borrowing the imagery of Charli. But Katy has been on the pop scene for a while too. You know, she's almost 40. What do you make of the new look that Katy Perry's coming out with? Is it brat adjacent to you? Also, what is a brat image?
This is a great question, because I do consider myself a Katy cat, but like on the low. Right?
You have to hide it.
You're
like,
not loud about it. Yeah.
I can't be out here being like I'm a Katy cat, but like I am a Katy cat.
You were writing for Swish Swish? So y'all stay safe. That's wild.
Witness,
that's wild. Can't relate. Okay,
Witness
continue.
It's a great album, but that's beside the point.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think I don't know. I think it's interesting, right? Because, you know, we're seeing, I think, a lot of artists who maybe were mainstream in the 2010s the way that Charli wasn't. Because Charli was working in the underground, you know, the back half of 2010s, you know, releasing Vroom Vroom and other very kind of, you know, experimentally pop records. Yeah. And, you know, what were we seeing in the mainstream at the time? Big A-list pop stars still kind of relying on the radio. So now where we find ourselves at in the mid-2020s is these big A-list pop stars kind of adopting the aesthetics of the underground pop stars, because A-list pop stardom isn't necessarily working in the way that it used to. And I think, like, you know, because of TikTok, because of the internet, because of, you know, all these fragmented fan bases, there really is like a lack of a monoculture. And I think A-list pop stars get scared by that. So they're like, oh, who has a big fan base right now? Who's generating, you know, really great press? Who has, you know, dedicated movement behind them? And in Katy's case, you know, they're like, oh, Arca, Charli XCX, you know, these like really, I don't know, like they have queer people that are willing to go to the ends of the earth.
They have
for
queer
them.
People by the busload willing to show up for them. Yes, 100%.
Exactly. And so I think that now we're seeing, you know, all these quote unquote A-list pop stars adopting the aesthetics of smaller artists, but maybe like, you know, 5 years too late.
Well, I mean, I wonder if it will work for someone like Katy Perry, because I am not a Katy cat, either on the low or up front. We can talk about that some other time. I do want to talk about the public rollout of this album, because I'm really interested in the way that we've been talking about this album. And to that end, you know, Charli put out Brat, and then she put out Brat, but with 3 more songs. And then she put out this remix. And I want to talk about the remix real quick. But first, I wonder if we can play the Charli XCX song, Girl So Confusing. Let's just hear a little bit of it right now.
It's so confusing sometimes to be a girl. It's so confusing sometimes to be a girl, 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 girl.
Right. So Charli puts out the song, Sachi, and then the internet kind of goes crazy with trying to figure out, hey, who is this song about? Because this song is somewhat about an animosity that she has with somebody else, maybe an uncomfortable relationship that she has with another pop star. Pretty quickly, the Charli fandom is like, this is about Lorde. This is clearly a song about Lorde, about like how difficult it is to sometimes feel like you're in competition with this other artist and you're constantly sort of comparing yourself to them. And then a week and a half later, Lorde is on the remix. Let's work it out on the remix. Let's hear the Lorde verse that she added to Girl So Confusing.
Well, honestly, I was speechless when I woke up to your voice. Now you tell me how you've been feeling. Let's work it out on the remix. You'd always say let's go out, but then I'd cancel last minute. I was so lost in my head and scared to be in your pictures.
I can't lie to you, Sachi. I don't think I've ever like teared up listening to a song at 120, beats per minute. I think that was a new experience for me. But Lorde's verse is like, I'm so sorry. I've been sort of at war with myself for this whole time. When I was 10, someone said this really awful thing to me and it stuck with me and it shaped entirely how I view the world. So like this album is like engaging with a certain messy idea of girlhood. What do you make of the Lorde and Charli XCX collaboration there?
I mean, I think it's really interesting. Like I'm the kind of person who like really likes it when somebody fights at the table next to me. And so this felt like listening to that argument and getting the conclusion at the same time, which was really thrilling. But it does sort of fit in the grand pantheon of Brat and like of heaviness with like this really fun song that does make me want to like go run in circles. Yeah. But I'm running in circles thinking about how uncomfortable it is to be a human woman in the world and how much I have to kind of contend with. So it feels exactly right. And I think it's kind of a testament to like, there's a lot of people who do want to like listen to something profound, but it doesn't necessarily have to be awash in violins and, tear-jerking music.
Yeah, like I was expecting that kind of emotion to be sort of like an acoustic song that is about how this one relationship broke your heart. And then it turns out, no, you can...
That's Taylor Swift energy. And I don't need that. I'm so tired. She's on tour date 1150. I'm sleepy, Elamin.
We should tell people listening and not watching this that Sachi's physically pushing away whatever Taylor Swift energy
And I'm saying that I went to see 1989. And even I'm like, I get it.
Rihanna, listen, you mentioned that the pop machine behind Katy Perry, but there's also, there is one behind Charli XCX too. And we should talk about the difference. What's the difference between the two of them?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the difference is like Charli's team is a lot smarter.
Okay, go on.
I think they're, I think they're working better. I think they're more curated. I don't know. I talked to Charli, I interviewed her for her last record, Crash, right? And that record, she went on the record multiple times to say, this is my big, like, mainstream album rollout.
Crash was, yeah.
Right. Like, this is my payola record, like... I wanted to do the big mainstream pop thing. And then releasing Brat after that, I think is very smart because it kind of pivots herself away from that quote unquote mainstream pop aesthetic, even though the album is ostensibly bigger than any of her previous records. Yeah. And I think that's, I think it's really well curated because of this. I said it before, the if you know factor of the PR around this record, where it's like, Charli's doing a boiler room, she's performing outside of the Lot Radio. She has that giant wall in Brooklyn that you could live stream and tap into, it's like she's kind of curating this like very specific rollout, very specific promo that like you kind of feel like you're like in on something when you tap into it in a way that reaches a lot of people, but still manages to be like really well curated.
Yeah, like I think like as you watch this rollout, she's doing like an incredible trick, which is sort of, as the album gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like the message that you're getting from the rollout is, isn't it a little crazy how big this album has gotten? Because it used to be just the two of us. Meanwhile, she's communicating that to everybody. And I think like that's a very skillful kind of rollout. I think curated is the right word. Sachi, I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier, the idea that this album taps into a larger mood, this malaise that's out there. What is the staying power of this moment, you think?
Well, Elamin, in your 48 years of life, has anything gotten that much better? Because in my 22 years of life, obviously I am 22,
Sure.
Nothing has really gotten that much better. Things have often gotten worse. Some stuff improves. We see it. There's a reason that we're fighting. I don't want to make it sound like malaise is the only option, but malaise is an important part of social change. And so we're seeing that it doesn't improve that fast. And the way that it improves is in death and destruction. So the staying power of this is forever. This might be where we are for a really long time. We have this new generation coming in. They're starting to come of age during a couple of really brutal election cycles. Again, lots of war, famine, death, destruction. It's brutal outside. So what can you do? Well, you can go to the park and listen to Brat.
That's not so Julia, but I appreciate both of you guys being here. Rihanna, Sachi, I appreciate your time. You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Of course, Sachi Cole, who's basically my age, by the way, is a senior writer at Slate in New York. Rihanna Cruz is a writer for Vulture and producer of Switched on Pop podcast. They're based in LA. Charli XCX's latest album, Brat, is out now. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion, and that's what you call a hard pivot. That song might take you back to the dance clubs back in circa 2000. That's a bit of L'amour toujours from DJ Gigi D'Agostino. For some reason, I can't say his name. If you were a Eurodance fan back in those days, you could not escape this particular song. But last month, the song returned in a somewhat surprising way. It was at the center of a viral video that is now raising some concerns about alt-right communities. Yes, those two things are connected because they're reportedly these communities are co-opting popular dance anthems for their own racist and xenophobic agendas. Kieran Press-Reynolds wrote a piece about this for Dazed. He's with me from New York. Kieran, welcome to the show.
Hey, Elamin, thanks for having me on.
Of course. Listen, I want to make it clear that, like, as far as we know, there's nothing about this song that is intrinsically racist or xenophobic. It is simply just a dance song. So what exactly happened in this viral clip that made us get to hear?
So there's this viral video of a bunch of men and women, kind of this large crowd outside of this bar in Sylt, an island in Germany. And they're chanting along to the song, but instead of the lyrics, which are about love, they're chanting Germany for the Germans, foreigners out, these xenophobic messages, and it went viral.
Okay, that's I would say that's cause for alarm. So if I'm not mistaken, there were also allegedly other remarks during that incident, including some kind of altercation. What was going on there?
Yeah, according to I believe it's Euronews, a bunch of the crowd and party goers made like a racist remark at a young black woman and apparently punched her in the face too.
Oh my God. Okay. This is stressful to me because sometimes messages can hook onto pop music because like that's what pop music is for. It's sort of, it's for you to pick up on a message and then make it bigger and bigger and bigger. That's sort of like what makes pop music such a perfect vehicle for emotion. But part of your piece seems to tie that viral clip to this larger alt-right online communities who are co-opting popular dances and for their racist and xenophobic purposes. Can you talk a little bit about that? About like what else do we know about these communities?
Yeah, totally. So there's this like nascent movement. They call itself Save Europe, posting on TikTok and YouTube, all these like anti-immigrant messages about, fighting against Islamic thought, conquering Europe. And they call their music, they've created this made-up genre called Save Europe. And they have these YouTube channels called like Aryan Classic and Save Europe, where they upload songs like L'amour toujours. And if you go to any recent upload of the song, or basically any upload dating back like 15 years, all of the top comments and new comments now are about what happened in Sylt. People celebrating it, saying more things like this need to happen. There's even an account that uploaded a remix of the song with the chants from the bar, and it has over like 100,000 views. It's good and going all over.
What do you think it is about dance music in particular that's driving the alt-right to say, you know what, this will be the kind of music that we use for these purposes?
That's a great question. I think it could be something to do with like the naturally like motivating, rousing spirit of dance music and like these kind of songs have like always been or long been used at like football games and sports stadiums. And so there's this sort of like nationalistic, regionalistic element that's tied into it. And I think for a song that's so passionate, you can easily like rewire the lyrics into being like pride for your country or, pride for whatever. So I don't think it's too far of a jump for these people to kind of invert the positive message of the song.
The thing that you just said there makes me think of, so I'm a fan of the Liverpool Football Club in the English Premier League. And, quite a few of our big cheers, our big anthems are just big sort of dance songs reworked, like Ain't Nobody Love Me Better. We use that and we go, okay, we're going to say Ain't Nobody Like Joe Gomez, which like he's a defender for the team. And so there's something about, you're exactly right. Like there's something about dance music that makes a large sort of group of people say, how can we adopt this for our purposes? What's been the reaction like from the actual platforms, in terms of watching these songs be used for racist purposes?
From what I've seen, there's barely any action.
Really?
I know on TikTok, you can't type in or you can't use the hashtag Save Europe, which I guess would be the big umbrella they would congregate under.
Sure.
So it seems like TikTok prohibited that at some point, but you can still type in Save Europe and like pretty easily access the videos and the songs. And on YouTube, there's just like over like Nazi fetishism in the comments, and there are even songs where people are like remixing the music by weaving in audio of like the chief Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels, like him talking, and that's just like totally online. It has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views. So at this point, it seems like they're not really taking an active stance and trying to stamp it out.
You do say that some of the people who are responsible for this stuff, they say, you know what, we're just making entertainment. Do you buy that argument?
I don't think so. I think this is a tactic that has been used for a while. It's kind of like one of those things where these platforms often don't have great content moderation. So if you give this like disclaimer saying that, we have this Nazi audio, but actually it's just for comedic purposes, like it's kind of a way to get past these people who are probably skimming the video very quickly. And yeah, it's like I think a tactic as well as like using dog whistles to like avoid detection and keep your stuff online.
Listen, if I'm an artist and my song is being associated with some of this stuff, maybe I would want to speak out and say, I'm very uncomfortable with any of this. Have we heard from any of the artists involved at all, or have they kind of been quiet?
Gigi was definitely upset. I think he spoke out, really taking aim at like the idea that his song is now being banned in places like it's prohibited at Oktoberfest. It's prohibited from being the Australian Football Association, I believe, also banned it from being played at stadiums. And I think he said something along the lines of like, you can't stop racism by banning music. So especially because his song was made to be about love and not like ethnic purity or whatever. He was really upset that this happened.
Do you end up like, I guess I wonder about their involvement here, because I wonder if those artists are thinking about how those songs may be getting more plays now, like, so in some ways they can't avoid being in the conversation, right?
Right, totally. I think that the similar thing happened with MGMT's Little Dark Age, which has become like a surprise hit in the last couple of years because it was similarly co-opted by these alt-right factions online, and it can provide like hundreds of thousands of streams to a song. So there's kind of like a tension there for sure.
Yeah. How do you see all this playing out? Like when you start to see this whole scene, and now with your article, I think there's a bit more attention to it. How do you see it playing out?
I think it's tough because, banning a song in general, like, you could see that like just incentivizing people to use it more because alt-right communities tend to thrive on that kind of like thinking they're on the punk vanguard, like they're being censored. But at the same time, I think that if there are more incidents like this, and it seems like there could be considering the like audience surrounding this, I think there's going to be more pressure put on platforms to like actively track the dog whistles and to go into these sounds being used and like really try and cut out the hate at its root rather than letting it fester so dramatically like it has.
Well, Kieran, I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time, man. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Kieran Press-Reynolds is a digital culture writer. He was in New York. And listen, that is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I just want to say a quick thank you to my pal Emil Niazi for filling in for the past couple of weeks. We're back. Listen, you can find us on Instagram at CommotionCBC. Once again, I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. We'll see you tomorrow.